Hey everyone, today we're going to go over the standard purchase agreement. There are a lot more other forms to making an offer, but this is the main one that I wanted to go over with you guys. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, there we go. Let me get some examples. So I've got a couple examples here. One is an example of when I took a contract training class with an attorney at REIN with all my highlights and all my notes. You'll be able to see all of that here as well. And then I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like now with Transaction Desk. It really doesn't change much, but every year REIN tries to change a little bit of verbiage. So at the very front here, you can see right here, we have the date. This agreement is made on blank. We have the buyer's names, and then we have the seller name. Then we always have the buyer's firm name, buyer's REIN MLS ID, and then we have this listing firm and then their REIN MLS ID. Then we have the legal property of the property, legal address, sorry. That is actually the main thing that is important here. The name 501 Hillshire Way, that's great, but all you really need is the legal name. In Transaction Desk, if you do it from Matrix to Transaction Desk, it'll auto fill in a lot of stuff, which I'll show you as well. The EMD, that's what it's talking about, the deposit, the earnest money deposit, usually somewhere between $500 and $1,000, or even sometimes 1% of the purchase price. In this instance, it's $500, and then it's asking how that check is being paid. Here it's being a personal check, and then it's being paid to the escrow agent, which in this case is Anchor Realty. In most cases now, you'll actually see our attorney, Sexford Ahern Levy. But then we have another paragraph here that says, buyer has paid the deposit, or buyer will pay the deposit within 2 business days of ratification, but really it's within 5 days in an escrow account. But they want us to make sure it's within 2 business days. So I always put down will pay unless we've already put it in there. And I always try to get the buyer to bring it to the attorney rather than me having to bring that EMD to the attorney. But if I really want the money and really want the deal, I'll go ahead and pick it up if they can't and do it myself. Next thing we have is the offer price to how much we're going to be offering on the property. Just say this property was worth $300,000. We're offering $282,500, and then next we're going to say how much we're putting down and how much is going to be in a loan. So usually mine will look like this. TBD, TBD. Those TBDs are actually in the wrong spot. None of this really matters right here. What does matter is by the loan. So here it says FHA, and the other one it says VA. If it's conventional, you just write conventional there. But whatever loan type it is, VHDA, that's what you're going to put there. The next thing you're going to see is the ratified date by who. Technically, this is not needed. Really, it's really just for a date to know when all contingencies start. So like say you're doing the home inspection and it's 10 days from ratification. Seeing this date, okay, yes, 10 days later, but technically, as soon as both parties agree, that's when it's ratified. So this is only for time. It's not necessary. And usually, if you want to be correct, it would be just say the buyer's agent sent something over to the listing agent. They agree, yes, they accept. But if they counter and they counter back and then they initial everything, technically the selling agent could say, yes, we agree, and then the listing agent would then sign because at that point the buyers could have backed away. But since they agreed again, now the listing agent is going to sign it. Next thing we have is the settlement expenses. This talks about how much closing costs is actually going to be paid. So this is the standard paragraph that I always have put in there. Seller paid 3% of the final sales price towards buyer's closing costs, prepaids, brokerage fees, or any items at buyer's sole discretion. And seller pays for a 1-year home warranty. At this time is up to $450 from 210 home buyer's warranty. So one, I always try and get the closing costs included and the home warranty included. Now the home warranty could be put in another paragraph. I just like doing it in one, but technically you can split it up. And it's really important with this paragraph where it says seller to pay 3%. because if you're a good listing agent, you'll notice the to pay 3%. This means no matter what, seller is paying 3% no matter what, even if the buyer's closing cost doesn't go all the way up to it. Now, just say the buyer's closing costs didn't go up to it. Just say in this instance, 3% is $9,000. Buyer's closing cost is only $7,000. Sellers here are losing $2,000 for no reason that can be applied anywhere else because it's at buyer's sole discretion. If it's a VA loan, it can even be used towards buyer's debt down, which means if they have credit card debt, they can use that $2,000 to buy down their credit card debt, which is insane. So a good listing agent would actually cross out this verbiage and say seller to pay up to 3% of the final sales price. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to save your seller all the money, but it gives them a better chance of saving the money. On the buyer's end, you always want to try and get the maximum, so you put seller to pay the 3%. And the rule of thumb is once you start going below 200,000, you start needing just a little bit more than 3% as well. So just say if it's a $100,000 deal, you're most likely going to need 4% or even 4.25% to get everything covered. Just say it's 150, really you want to aim for 4% or 3.5%. You want to go above that 3. Ratification date, this is talking about when everything's ratified. So this means on the ratification date of communication of final written acceptance, can't talk today, by buyer and seller of all terms of this agreement. And then it's talking about the escrow agent shall place a deposit in escrow account by the end of the 5th business banking day, followed by the ratification date. And note, it says business banking day. So, if banks are closed, it doesn't count. If it's a holiday, it doesn't count. A weekend doesn't count. It's got to be during the week and a normal day. This talks about who the loan is going to be through. So if it's a cash deal, it'd just be N/A. But usually we have a lender. So here we would put Movement Mortgage in this instance. Or if we scroll down in this other example, we've got United and Atlantic Mortgage. We keep on going down. It talks about loan denial and what happens if there is a loan denial. Basically, the buyer has to let the seller know within 3 days loan denial, and then they can get their EMD back, the deposit. That's what they're talking about here. The intent to occupy, this is asking if the buyer wants to say they're going to live in here or not. Usually it does. Representations, this really just talks about if there is a release agreement, if there's judgments, liens, payoffs. Nothing entirely that you need to know in that paragraph. That would be more for the title to find and all that. And then if anything bad did happen, the closing company is going to let you know, and then you'll be able to figure out another way from there. But usually in that instance, if something bad is going wrong, you want to go to your brokers to be able to figure that out, because that stuff gets a little messy. This right here is asking if the seller is a U.S. citizen or not. And then it says if they aren't a U.S. citizen, but again, nothing entirely important there. The next paragraph, E, this is if there's a septic system or not. Usually it's not, but if the septic system's been good and checked, you're going to check mark the second one. And if the seller is going to go fix something, then it's going to be the third one here. But usually there's no septic system, and usually if there is, it's the second one. It's not too often where it's the third one. The next important thing here is a settlement / possession. When are you going to close? So usually I'm aiming for 30 days out. If we're doing a closing with United Atlantic Mortgage, we can close within just 2 weeks. Navy Federal and all them, they're generally 45 days out. So like just say if we wrote contract today, 12/13, I'm usually going to go about 4 weeks out. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and aim to close on the 18th or 19th. We can even close on the 17th. I generally try not to close on a Friday because that means you're not getting paid until they record, which is the day after closing. Well, no one's open on Saturday, which means they record on the Monday, which means you don't get paid until Monday or Tuesday. So I try to avoid that, have closing on the 20th, get paid on 21st. It's usually a good plan. There is a 10-day extension. This is most cases general. If there is any complications with title or the lender, there's usually a 10-day extension where we're fine. If we go past that 10 days, you're going to want to get an addendum stating how far you're going for that. This also talks about how no settlement agent can provide legal advice to any party to the transaction except the settlement agent who's engaged in the private practice of law in Virginia. So people who, like an example, use linear title where they don't have an attorney on staff, they can't really give legal advice. We love using Sykes, Verdon, Aver, and Levy because Howard Sykes is the attorney and can give legal advice if something goes awry in the transaction. Sometimes it does, so it is good to be able to call the attorney and ask for some advice. Deed and title, let's see, keep title insurance as a buyer forever. That is pretty important. So as a buyer, they're usually going to get owner's and title insurance. Usually it's required by the lender to get title insurance. Owner's insurance is not mandatory, but they should almost always get it. And basically this is example, if anything bad ever happened down the road and just say title didn't pass clear, now if you have that owner's title insurance, they're going to cover you, they're going to pay the cost that's needed. So you want to keep that with you forever, even if you sell the house, just say 20 years ago, you still have that owner's and title insurance policy, which always remains. You just pay for it at closing, and that's usually within the closing costs. Then you'll be fine, and then you don't have to worry about a $45,000 loss later. It sounds crazy, but crazy stuff does happen. At the bottom here, we're asking if the buyer wants a survey or not. Usually we're waiving a survey because usually we have a good idea of where the lines are, but if it kind of looks iffy, then they can get a survey. We'll go down to if it's new financing or if it's an assumption. Generally, it's new financing, cash sale, anything like that. We're not really in the stage of assumptions just yet. In 2020, interest rates are still low, about 3.5%, 3.25%. Maybe one day in just say 2030, where interest rates are just say 8%, someone can assume a 3.25% interest rate, and then this is where it's going to be assumed. So we're not at that stage yet. It generally is just the new financing. The next part is going to be asking, again, what type of financing we're doing. So if it's a VA loan, FHA, whatever you put at the top over here. So for instance, we put a VA loan on page 1 here. You're going to go back down and put down VA. Now, if it's an FHA loan, like this one is FHA. We're going to scroll down. And then we're going to hit FHA/HUD, and then we put down the amount that we're offering. So whatever you offer, this is what changes. So if you guys ever make changes to the purchase price or the offer price, you got to make changes to this as well. So if there's change to that, change to this as well. But we'll keep on going. If it's conventional, if it's cash, it asks, does the cash buyer want an appraisal? Generally not, but sometimes they do. Property condition, there's generally anything wrong with the house and you want to get it covered before the PICRA. This is where I ask for that stuff. So here there was really bad drainage in the backyard. So we wanted a proper drainage system that makes the yard dry properly. And that's not something we wanted to deal with in the PICRA, and this kind of was a deal breaker. So we wanted to make sure we asked for that ahead of time. So if anything is wrong, they definitely want it fixed, ask for it here. If not, then get it on the PICRA later. And then this is very important as well. This talks about seller shall deliver the property at settlement as otherwise provided in substantially the same condition as of the date of this agreement, free of personal properties, debris, and trash. Seller assumes until settlement all risk of loss or damage to the property by fire, windstorm, casualty, or other hazards. So what this is saying is at closing, house has to be empty, swept clean, really broom clean. And then all of their personal property has to be gone. And then not just that, if there was anything wrong, like, so say we're walking through the house and we already wrote this contract. We're walking through the house, and you see a hole in the wall. Well, that hole wasn't there before. So technically the sellers have to go and fix that before closing because it has to be in the same condition as it was when this date happened. The next thing here is going to talk about the cap, where it's about the inspections, repairs, treatments, and cap. Seller shall be responsible for the cost of repairs referenced in paragraph 13, not to exceed 1%. If you leave this blank, it's still 1%. But it's for appraisals, required repairs, wood destroying insects and moisture damage, and then drinking water and septic. So those are all the things that fall under the cap. And then this talks about if it goes past the cap, then the buyer alone or seller alone or buyer and seller jointly can agree to pay the excess. Neither party agrees to pay the excess amount, and an acceptable alternative agreement cannot be reached, and this agreement shall be terminated. All parties shall execute a release agreement, and the deposit shall be refunded in full to the buyer. So basically, and I just had this happen not too long ago, if just say the house was $100,000, the cap for this instance would be $1,000 because of 1%. Say there's termite damage that is $1,500. Buyer says, hey, I'm not going to pay the $500 difference. Seller, are you going to pay? Seller says no. Technically, the buyer can walk away and get their $500 indie back. But if the seller says, yes, we're going to fix the $500 extra, then we continue moving forward. Then if the buyer wanted to get out at that point, they're going to lose their deposit and maybe a little bit more. Appraisal. All buyers must get an appraisal to get a loan. So no matter what, if they're trying to get a loan, they have to pay for the appraisal, and that's usually out of their pocket. So I generally tell them it's roughly $550. That's generally what appraisals cost. This talks about the termite and moisture inspections, who is going to order it, and who is going to pay for it. Generally, I have the sellers obtain it, and at the seller's expense, and it's usually around like $70, if that, for this inspection. And I like having the sellers get it because usually they've got a plan already in place that they've had people come in to look at it. And then if there's anything extra you wanted to look at, so here we wanted a detached garage and shed because that's not included in it, then they'll go ahead and look at that as well. This talks about this 10 days, saying it must be delivered to an agent within 10 days of what's going on with the property. So if there needs to be a clear letter basically within 10 days, or if there are problems wrong, we need to see what's going on within that 10-day mark. So in this instance, if the buyer ordered it and didn't get it within the 10 days, then technically the seller can now order it and charge the buyer $100 for it. Or really up to $100 because no reports go over that $100 mark. This talks about the drinking water and septic. This is saying if it's city water, public, or if it's a well, the water must be tested. And then the tests really aren't that expensive to test that. This talks about the septic, who is going to get it, at whose expense. And then PICRA items, and this is important, are separate from the 1% cap. So again, the 1% cap, we'll read back up here in this paragraph, is for the appraisal and those required repairs, the termite and moisture, and then the drinking water and septic. That's all of the cap. The PICRA is separate from all of that. This also talks about seller shall repair and correct all defects prior to the walkthrough inspection at seller's expense, subject to the cap. With the walkthrough inspection, you always want to make sure that the seller has the utilities on for the walkthrough. I generally make the walkthrough about 3 to 4 days before closing, because if there's anything wrong with the property and you guys agree to get it fixed and they didn't fix it properly, then they have to go back and fix it. And if this was on closing day and you did this, now what's going to happen is you're going to have to delay closing. And it's not just you guys in the transaction. There's about 15 other people that have been working on this transaction, so it pushes everyone back. So you as a buyer's agent can at least be diligent on getting this done sooner. So if there are problems, they have time to fix it, then you have to come back and then check it out again. And you always want to make sure the buyer checks it, because you don't want that on you. This next part asks if there's any other contingencies. So if it's a condo, it would be. So in this other one, it was a condo. So it says is a condo, and then it says how much it is for the condo fees. And that you'll just find at the bottom right corner in REIN. It'll tell you exactly how much it is per month for the condo fees or HOA fees. If it's an HOA, it would be here. In this instance, it is. So is 25. If it's neither of those, then you would just put not, and then if it's a co-op, usually in Hampton Roads there aren't many co-ops, but there are some, but generally it's not. Property inspections, this is if the buyer wants a home inspection done. Usually we put desires, sometimes no. Doesn't happen often, but usually you want one. And then this is important: should buyer elect to waive the property inspection, buyer understands that a home inspector will not be permitted to conduct or perform a property inspection at walkthrough beyond the terms of the paragraph. So I usually get a home inspection. It's not much. It's $330. I would rather have someone check out the entire house that knows houses properly, rather than not check it out, and I'd be surprised later that there's a leak in the wall, something like that. This talks about EIFS, if there is any. EIFS is really just a type of, not siding, but exterior finish. It says here, exterior insulation and finish system or synthetic stucco. I live in Lagomar, and there are actually some houses that have it. You have to upkeep it every single year, or the stuff just starts breaking down very badly. So if there is EIFS, you want to get an inspection for it to make sure that everything is fine there. The house was built before 1978. You have to put in the lead-based paint disclosure. If it was built after, you don't have to, and then that's where we just check X. But if it was, do they want a lead-based paint inspection, waives or desires? And then later they've got to fill out that form. If there's other contingencies, like a pool contingency, chimney, roof, HVAC, you would actually put that in the PICA or the PICA, whatever people like calling it, showing that you want these additional contingencies. And here you have it as well. The next thing is we're going to ask for which stuff in the house we want to include. So usually appliances, we want to ask for all the appliances. If there's windows with the blinds, curtains, drapes, hardware, usually we're asking for all of that. Trash containers, smoke detectors, ceiling fans, anything with a fireplace, because if you guys don't check mark this, seller can technically take it away. And there was one time where I accidentally forgot to check mark the refrigerator. I don't know how I missed it, but you know, at walkthrough, seller took the fridge, and I had to go buy a new fridge. Not one of my happier days. So if the buyers want a dryer and washer included, that's already there. You know, make sure you check mark that, because you don't want the seller to take it. And then this is to add additional notes. So here I put seller to purchase and install a fridge in the kitchen up to $2,300 before closing. So we had the buyer choose a fridge below $2,300, and then the seller actually purchased it and they installed it, and then it was in there before closing. So at walkthrough, we saw the fridge was there. So I do that every now and then, but with this verbiage, you've got to make sure the lender is okay with it, because lenders and underwriters are very specific sometimes. The next thing is talking about the brokerage relationship. Generally, it's going to be number 2 that says I am working with the buyer and the listing firm is working with the seller. Now, each one is different. Like, for example, number 1, it says listing firm, selling firm, and their salespersons represent the seller as their client. Buyer is a customer and an unrepresented party, and their salespersons represent the seller as their client. So anything that is not number 2 generally needs another disclosure saying what's going on. Like number 4 here is a FSBO, forced sale by owner, saying that the buyer is represented by us, the selling firm, and the seller is not represented. So if there is something else other than 2, normally you need to get this signed, the disclosure of brokerage relationship, to unrepresented party form. And then all you have to do is really read these, and it'll tell you exactly who represents who. But again, usually it's number 2. If you have a question, just ask your broker. This talks about the aircraft noise, the ACUs. Normally it's going to be -65 and none. Depending on where you live, like if you live in Oceana, it's most likely going to be 75 plus. Just say the APZ2, that you're in zone 2 basically. So this is really talking about the noise level, and then the second one is talking about what level of danger you're in, I guess. There's 3 or 4 levels, which is in ACUs. You would find all this info in the REIN MLS, but it all depends on your buyer, and you know the how do I want to explain this? With the jet noise, it's if the buyer wants it or not. And if they're there and they hear a bunch of jets, then obviously I don't think they should buy the property if they don't like it. So really, I always tell my buyers to go check out the house a couple times, check out the area. If they're hearing jet noise consistently, but they love the house, it's like, can you live with the jet noise? If they say no, then I don't think we should buy this house. If they say yes, then let's go for it. And I've sold multiple houses at Oceana, which is right next to the base. They love jet noise, so it works out good. This next check mark here is asking if it's in the city of Hampton and subject to the noise levels there because of the Air Force Base. The next one is the agency interest disclosure. So really, if you have any family member that you're working with, like if I'm working with my sister, I'm going to say selling agent is related to buyer, Angela Frangoules. And that's always how I always set it up. If it's on the listing side and you're writing this offer, make sure you include this as well. Generally, they'll have it in the agent remark saying listing agent is related to, just say Barry Jenkins, just someone like that. The Megan's Law, this talks about if there's any sex offenders. Really, we have no rights in saying anything about it, so we tell them to go check on their own. Mechanics liens and all that will pop up in title. None of this is really important stuff. Brokerage fee. So I highlight here, entitled to payment at settlement as provided by separate agreements. So in our agency buyer broker, it says that we charge an extra $395 per transaction. And that's really what it's talking about, but we have to make sure that they agree to that extra money. And it's saying, yes, we can charge it, but it's got to be on a separate form because it's not in this. Let's see, if there is a problem and you're part of HURRAH, there can be a mediator basically where HURRAH will do it, and it's generally somewhere between $75 and $500. Or you guys can go to court, which is definitely a lot more money later. But only if you're a HURRAH member, this is where you can get it through HURRAH. There are other places. The first thing to do is go to both brokers, see if they can figure it out. If you guys can't, then see if the attorneys can figure it out. And if the attorneys can't, then you're most likely going to court at that point. But that happens maybe 0.1% of the time. Generally, both brokers can figure it out together. So that is where you want. First, we want you guys to figure it out. Second, if you can't, then go to the brokers and we'll try and figure it out from there. Other provisions, this is where I would ask for extra stuff. So I would say seller to leave the dining room table, something like that. It's just extra stuff in the contract that can be put down right in here. I'm pretty sure this is where James will put down his home warranty info, where he's asking for the home warranty here. Let's see. This just talks about the business banking days and what that means. If the buyers are okay with electronic signatures, definitely want them to sign that. Then the next thing is going to be all the signatures, and it's going to even say where they're at. Let me go to one that's actually ratified. So page 14. There we go. So here we've got the buyer signature, the selling agent, which is the buyer's agent signature, all the REIN ID for the firm, for myself, the sellers, and that is it with the standard purchase agreement. So it's kind of a lot. It's 14 pages. You know, if you read all the paragraphs, they tell you exactly what it is every single time. If you ever have questions on it, you know, just ask one of your brokers. Transaction desk, I've got most of it set up to where it's just auto, so you don't have to worry about filling in a bunch of the stuff. And if you do this from REIN, actually I'll just show you an example very fast. So if you go directly from REIN over to creating the transaction, then it'll auto fill in a lot of this stuff. So if I go to a random listing, which I'm going to do in a second. Okay, so we're going to matrix. And then we're going to go to a random listing, and then there's a specific button that you click on where you can connect the two. So let's just say I'm going to go to one of my pending listings, and it is this one right here that looks like it even says transaction desk. So once you click on that, it'll bring you over to transaction desk and carry over a lot of the info, so you don't have to, like the legal, the legal address, some of the important documents. If you just fill it out on your own on transaction desk, you're gonna have to fill out a ton more stuff. So always go from matrix to transaction desk this way, and it'll definitely save you a lot of time, a lot of hassle. So if you guys really had any questions, we're always here to help you. There's a lot during it. REIN even has contract training classes every now and then. Always take it. It's great to hear from an attorney. But from my eyes as the agent, those are the important things I'm looking for, and to understand in case the buyer asks me something, or if there ever is an issue, kind of know where to go and know what to do. So I'm always here for help. James is always here to help. If you guys ever need anything, we're here for you. Take care, everyone.